As a 41-footer weighing in at over 40,000 pounds in typical cruising trim, she's in a class of her own as a traditional heavy displacement cruiser. Still available today under special order and on the used market, the Hans Christian 41 is a beautiful example of sail around the world quality built in a different time. These are still available today under special order and definitely on the used market. The Hans Christian 41 Traditional was first introduced in 1985. The name Hans Christian conjures up associations with boats that are heavy, sometimes a bit slow, but always sea kindly. Boats that are laden with teak and huge luxury interiors wrapped in the form of a traditional style canoe stern double-ender. We're talking about those massive bowsprits, cutter rigs, high bulwarks, butterfly hatches that are absolutely gorgeous, husky bronze fittings and bronze faucets, and a kind of character that speaks of seaworthiness that has its roots in American popularity with the introduction of Krelock's Westsail 32 in 1973. As a 41-footer weighing over 40,000 pounds in typical cruising trim, this boat is in the heavy displacement cruiser class. Influenced by the latest design thinking at the time, the underwater form has a split keel arrangement. Instead of a full keel, they cut it off a bit short, similar to the Telstar keels first appearing on the Hans Christian 38T in 1984, where it helped with close-winded sailing and light air performance as compared to a full keel. Aided by that split keel, the 41 Traditional has been described as an easy-to-sail boat. When comparing speeds to others in that range, the 41T is a little bit slower than the Telstar 43T, and it's said the smaller 38T can actually keep up with the 41 in ideal conditions. Also, don't expect a lot of light air performance given that displacement of 40,000 pounds. Then again, owners of Hans Christian boats aren't looking for speed, they're looking for comfort. In the comfort department, though, the boat excels with a very gentle sea-kindly motion, even in the heaviest of seas. Hans Christian Yachts has forged a name for itself starting in the early 1970s with quality Taiwanese boatyards. Its founder, John Edwards, has always had an eye for spying talent, too, hiring the best people. Notable boats include Bob Perry designs and the much-copied 34T, Harwood Ives' space-efficient 33T, and of course the classic 38T and its Mark II sequel. By late 1984, the company played with the idea of a new boat with focus on interior and a hull form that would bring it up to date with the latest design thinking. The result was the Hans Christian 41 Traditional, which at its introduction in 1985 gave the company an offering that slotted right in between their two 38 models and their bigger 43. As Craig Beckwith, VP of Sales during that period, puts it, the decision to build a 41, as always, began over a bottle or two of beer after the day's end and progressed to fruition. The thought was that we needed a bigger version of the 38 Mark II that had the galley of the 38 Traditional, the forward head arrangement from the 33 Traditional, which had proved very popular, and a split keel to move into the more modern designs of Perry, Freres, and other designers that touted the long cord fin with skeg-mounted rudder. The 41 Traditional was a collection of all the things that we had learned throughout the process of building all the other boats, and listening carefully to the clients that bought them and watching the market develop. The design came from Scott Sprague, with a lot of input from Edwards. Sprague at the time had become Hans Christian's chief designer after the departure of Harwood Ives, who penned many of the prior boats. Scott designed the 48T first, and then with John Edwards pulled together the general design of the 41T. Here again, John's ability to pick out a young designer with a really high degree of talent came into play. Scott's father did all the technical work for Bill Garden, and Scott grew up in a design-oriented family. He had a natural talent for design and technical ability. The first boats were built in Taiwan by South Coast Shipbuilding Yard until Hans Christian relocated to Thailand in 1990 to stay competitive. In Thailand, the progression of builders went from the Dutch East Indies Trading Company, Anderson Yachts, and eventually Pantawi Marine, who currently builds all the models of Hans Christian. In total, 55 of these things were built. It's probably best to describe the boats as being semi-custom in nature. There were at least 5 variations of the layouts officially. 4 were described in the original brochure, named Molokai, Harmony, Atlantic, and Pacific. The most popular was the Molokai layout with its twin head arrangement and double berths forward and aft. This has been the standard and the only layout that's been built since 1994. We also know of a 5th layout similar to the Molokai, but with workshops replacing the area where the aft quarter berth normally resides, and only 2 of those have been built to our knowledge. Interiors are of a very high workmanship, as we'd expect from Asia, and incorporate many ideas that proved popular for Hans Christian in prior models. I said before that these boats were built in a different time, and while you can still order a brand new one, they were built for a different time. And hear me out. A time before plastic production boats with sugar scoops and voluminous back bedrooms. A time before massive solar arrays and rocknet anchors. A time before Starlink and water makers. A time when cruising and living on a sailboat was totally different, and thus the boats were totally different. In the 60s and 70s, cruising was a lifestyle much like it is today, but the people, like Lynn and Larry Pardey, didn't have it so easy. These trailblazers we all look up to now didn't have the benefit of GPS. They charted everything meticulously, every mile, every waypoint. They dead reckoned, they used lead lines, and some even used sextants. And thus the boats were equipped with robust navigation stations. And without the benefit of global communication, satellite phones, and internet access, getting accurate weather forecasting was near impossible, so the boats were built differently. Back then, if you set out to sea by sailboat, you knew very little of what was to come, so the boat itself had to be able to handle anything. We saw full keels and extremely heavy displacement hulls, like the Hans Christian boats, as commonplace. When cruisers set out to sail, they had to know the hull could handle anything the weather might throw at it. And with that need for handle anything and everything displacement, they needed sail plans to do the same, which gives us the cutters and the catches and everything in between. Multiple head sails so you can maximize your adaptiveness to whatever the weather throws. Whether it be 10 knots on the beam or 50 knots on the nose, these boats had to be able to sail or at least heave to and any of it, and they could. And these boats would often be caught out in mighty seas, so the double ender was just more comfortable, taking waves on the stern in a sea-kindly fashion. Cockpits had to be small and tight so as not to allow the sailor to fall out. Sea berths below had to be just for one person and boxed well in to keep the off-watch person safe and sound while they rested. Cruising in the 60s and 70s was a lot like cross-country travel in the early 1800s. Once you left the safety of the other people, you were truly alone, left to fend for yourself no matter what happened. You couldn't just call for help beyond the range of VHF, and you had no access to other humans until you made landfall again. And to make that work, you needed a boat that would keep you safe, even when the crew gave up. A boat that, if all else fails, everyone's exhausted or injured, would let you go inside and board up and ride out the worst the ocean could throw at you, and still be upright and ready to sail after the weather cleared. And Hans Christian built those boats. In fact, they build them so well you can still buy them today, like this 41. And while these traditional style boats aren't for everyone, they are still the safest way to get the job done if you want to make some serious ocean miles. The only problem is they still go for a boatload of money. They often fetch over $200,000 on a price tag, and these boats may scare you a little bit because of that, but it's a testament to how well they were made, how beautiful they are, how capable. They still ply the world's oceans every day and circumnavigate every year, and they're some of the safest and most beautiful boats you can make those miles on. What boat would you like to see on Practical Sailor? Let us know in the comments. We'll see you next time.